Hello everyone, welcome back to my lecture. We began our discussion in our last class, externalities, and then how market failure happens due to externalities. So we began our discussion with negative externalities, and we are trying to understand what is the economics of negative production externalities. And then today we are going to talk about economics of consumption, negative consumption externalities. So let us first understand what is consumption externalities and negative consumption externalities. So for consumption, if any actions, due to any actions, if there is a changes in consumption, overall consumptions, or at the individual level consumption happens, that is basically the external consumption externality. So when we are referring like negative externalities is basically when an individual's consumption reduces the well-being of others who are not compensated by the individuals. Like if any behavior or for due to my consumption of certain commodity by me is actually getting others are getting affected by my consumptions, and I'm not compensating that individual or others, so that particular externalities, we call it negative consumption externalities. So here we can take an example of, say, cigarette. Is one of the very classic examples that in case of consumption, negative consumption externalities, we generally economists they take, or say any pollutions like air pollutions or any pollutions. So in terms of commodity market, let us assume that cigarette is a commodity, and then those who are smoking, whether the others are getting affected or not. So if they are getting negatively affected, that is what we are trying to understand or trying to say is like negative consumption externalities. So in this particular context, let us take the graphical explanations. Let us, so this is demand curve, which is say downward sloping, and here we are calling it like demand curve, which is equals to private marginal benefit, and on the vertical axis we are measuring price, and on the horizontal axis we are measuring quantity. And here is a case of say for the commodity X, and here X could be cigarette, right? Cigarettes. So in here we are trying to understand what is the negative externalities, negative consumption externalities that arises due to consumption of cigarette by an individuals, and what are the causes that others are having, and then what is the larger impact due to that negative consumption. So here for cigarette producers supply curve, so cigarette is being is demanded by private consumers, which is getting represented by demand for the for the cigarette, which is like D, and here based on the demand producers will supply, which is the upward supply curve, where marginal private marginal cost will be equals to supply curve, like that is how it is getting reflected by the supply curve. And then here say equilibrium, say A, but then due to consumption of the cigarette, we are assuming that there is a marginal damage. So at point A, we see in case of cigarette market, like private cigarette market is getting socially optimally efficient point of for production, and also socially optimum level of price, like say P1 and here say Q1. So OQ1 and OP1 is the equilibrium level or amount of price and quantity that is getting determined, and at point A is a socially optimal efficiency point for the private cigarette market, in the private cigarette market. And then now assume that it has the marginal damage, and then producers like passive smokers or the neighbors who are actually allergic to cigarette or smoke, they are getting negatively impacted on this. And let us assume that the cost is determined by the marginal damage, and then social marginal benefit will be different than private marginal benefit. So demand curve will have different demand curve, which will be regarded as social marginal benefit, which is nothing, it is like private marginal benefit minus marginal damage. So marginal damage that we get, and if we deduct marginal damage from private marginal benefits, then we get social marginal benefit. So we get another one equilibrium point here, so like say point B, and corresponding this point B, we are getting new level of quantity that will be produced or that is required for the society. Like society doesn't need OQ1 amount of a cigarette to be produced, because if that optimally gets produced by the private producers and consumers, and although it is getting socially getting socially efficient equilibrium point in the private market, but then OQ amount of optimum level of cigarette is actually will have some disadvantage at the society's level, and therefore this optimum level will have some cost that is associated, and therefore at point B, if producers they are producing, then it will have less amount of cigarette produced, and but then at the same time price also will be say less, like P2 price will fall, but then also quantity will also fall. So this is actually ideal is like producing at point B, but then private market it is actually getting kind of produced at point A. So there is a marginal damage that actually helps to shift social marginal benefit curve. So marginal damage is basically this area, which is marginal damage, and then we also get another point, say point C, and then so in the private market, like OQ1 is socially optimum or efficient, is socially optimal efficient point of or amount of production at private market, which is certainly not the socially optimum or efficient amount for the whole society when we consider all the consumers in this particular market. So OQ is socially optimum level of output as a whole in the society. Therefore we can see in this particular scenario production is getting reduced from Q1 to Q2. So certainly Q2 is less than Q1, and now just imagine that in the private market, if it is getting produced at point A, is a situation that people in the society will consume over than the socially optimum level as a whole. Like certainly Q1 minus Q2 is an indicator for the is nothing is basically over consumption amount of overconsumption situations of cigarette in this particular case, right? So if we are not producing at A, if we are producing at point B, then certainly area of ABC is deadweight loss. And then as a result that we are getting overconsumptions, right? So this is the case, like the loss, social loss is there, which can be measured by deadweight loss, and then optimum level of output and the price that we can also determine from economics point of view, and then in the market. And this is the effects of economic effects of the negative consumption externalities. So now let's move towards positive externalities, and also we'll show you how the effects in with the help of the similar components that we have considered while explaining with the help of graphs. So let us move to positive externalities. So now let us try to understand what is economics of positive production externalities. So what do we mean by positive production externalities? Not always that from the policy's point of view, it is always important that to understand negative impact or negative externalities of the production or consumptions, because that is where the policy makers, they will try to design the program or revisit their programs or revamp the program or the policies. But then this is also very important for economists or for all of us to understand what are the economics, or the is there any market failure that happens due to positive production externalities and also positive consumption externalities. And answer will be yes, there will be there is a market failure even in case of positive. It is not always true that market fails in case of negative production or consumption externalities. So let us first understand what is a positive production externalities. Is like when a firm's production increases the well-being of others, like but the firm is not compensated by those others. So it's basically others are getting benefited out of it. It has a positive impact, but then others are actually not returning that benefit to the private producers. So of course in this particular case that we can actually think like market fails, and how it fails, that we'll be talking about it. All right, so now let's have a look at these graphical representations, and then we'll try to show you like what is the optimum level of productions and the price, and then what are the losses, and where is the market failure conditions, and at what level that happens. So we'll again say take any market or any product, and then we'll try to understand what is the price, optimum level of price and quantity. So here price on the vertical axis, and quantities measure along with the horizontal axis. So let us assume that any product that has positive impact on the others, it could be any productions, for instance oil, additional oil company, they are coming in the market, and it will have the benefits to the others, and how it actually happens in the market, that let us actually assume. So for instance here like demand curve. So here is like private marginal benefit, and since it is production externalities and precisely positive production externalities, so this is the demand curve for the private producers, and here so supply curve of the private producers, which is getting measured by private marginal cost, and then we are getting point A, and at point A we are getting say um, Q1 amount of quantity and P1 amount of price, and this is socially efficient market equilibrium point, point A, in the private market of any commodity that we can imagine here. So certainly when we talk about, I mean, by definition, when we are talking about marginal benefits and social benefits, in this particular case, marginal benefit will be equals to private marginal benefits. So social marginal benefits will be equals to private marginal benefits. But then when we are talking about positive production externalities, that means here marginal benefits are associated with it, like what we can refer as MB is the marginal benefit here. So if I'm a producer of any commodity which actually others are getting benefit out of it, but then they are not transferring that benefit to me. So basically as a cost it will be like that will be less, I mean that will not be added to the cost, but then definitely I'm out of that particular benefit that others are enjoying, and I'm not getting compensated for that, and therefore social marginal cost will be downward, and will be downward by this amount of marginal benefits, which is nothing, it is like private marginal cost minus marginal benefit. That's how we get social marginal cost. And then we get new equilibrium point here. So new equilibrium point we get, it's like say B, and here we get Q2, and then price that we get at point B is like P2. So we get point P2. So quantity, with this we are having more quantity and less price, because that additional benefit is others are getting out of this production, but then me as a producer is not getting compensated for that, and therefore I am bearing the cost by the loss, per unit loss of the price, which is P1 P2 amount, right? Like this much amount of price that I am getting it, since others are getting benefit, and therefore obviously the overall additional production that will be happening in the market is like Q1 Q2 amount, right? So A is certainly is like equilibrium point, and OQ1 amount, OQ1 and OP1 is like optimum level of quantity and price under perfect competition, right? And then B is not under perfect competitive point, and then if producers in the market is producing and sticking to point Q1, and this is a loss that we will get it, which is one can refer at deadweight loss. So if we look at these particular situations where we see like economy will get more benefit out of producing up to OQ amount of quantity of that particular commodity, but then private producers are producing at point A, like at OQ amount of quantity. So certainly there is a deadweight loss, but then Q2 minus Q1, which is the loss per quantity loss from the production, and certainly this is like producers, if they're producing at point A, then Q2 Q1 is going out from the economy, and we are actually kind of economy, it is going or producing under production. So this is under production case, and the amount of underproduction is like Q2, Q1 amount, and then area of ABC is nothing, this is actually dead weight loss. So these are this is like dead weight loss for the this from positive production externalities. But in this particular case, it is very clear that any deviation from A, which is conditions where um, private producers are getting socially optimally equilibrium, but then any point deviation from A is basically market failure, because there is a social cost that is involved, which is represented as deadweight loss. So now let's move to the next point, which is economics of positive consumption externalities. So here we can take any sort of examples that as a consumer we are getting benefit out of the others sort of consumptions, and that will be referred as positive consumption externalities. And then an individual's, by definition what we mean is like an individual's consumption increases the well-being of the others. Like if somebody, my neighborhood planted very nice flower gardens, but then I'm also getting sort of benefit out of it, or I'm not switching on my light in the balcony because my neighbors, both the neighbors have already switched on their lights in the evening. So basically I'm also like I'm getting positive benefit out of it in terms of economic cost. I'm also saving that electricity cost that I'm not by not switching on the lights in my balcony. So let us understand what is the economics of positive consumption externalities with the help of graphical illustration. Like price is measured along with the vertical axis, and quantity is measured along with the horizontal axis. And here is like a demand curve, which is private marginal benefit, and here is supply curve, which is private marginal cost curve here. So this private marginal cost here will be, I mean, for the producers, like for the consumer, the primary consumer, like the who actually sort of planted the nice flower gardens, for his or her is the same, like social marginal cost, because it is not getting impacted at all, but then I'm getting benefit out of it. So I have the marginal benefit being a neighbor. So social marginal benefit will be, it's nothing, it's like private marginal benefit plus marginal benefit. So here again, like we can see there are two equilibrium points. So first equilibrium point here, second equilibrium point here. So in the first equilibrium point where Q1 amount of quantity and P1 amount of price is getting determined, and then at point B Q2 amount of output and P1 amount of price is getting increased. So certainly production is going up, like quantity is increased by Q1 Q2 amount, means quantity is increased from OQ amount to OQ2 amount. But as a result, price also, in this particular case, price also is increasing from OP1 amount to OP2, and my equilibrium point is also increased from A to B. So, but in this case, from the society's point of view, you just see here, like this is the loss that society is bearing. So Q is again OQ1 and OP1 is actually under under say perfect competition markets. But then here, since social marginal cost is higher than private marginal cost because of this marginal benefit amount, and therefore you know, overproduction is happening, like up to OQ2 amount. But then this is certainly is not a market or socially optimal point. So socially optimal point will be like say at B because marginal benefits, but then this marginal benefits is not getting compensated right by the consumer. So in this particular case you can see like social marginal benefit curve is is higher than private marginal benefit curve, and therefore it is going rightward shift, and this shifting is basically shifting, or the higher social marginal benefit is getting due to additional marginal benefit. And this benefit that I'm getting it because of my neighbor is not getting compensated. So certainly B is the point that will be in actual it will be like there is a demand, but then in actual production is happening or consumption is happening at point A, and therefore Q2 is higher than Q1, but then actual production is happening like Q1 is getting determined. So Q2 minus Q1, that we are not getting it, and this is actually the case of under consumption. So this particular amount is not getting consumed because of because of this equilibrium that market achieved at point B. And area of loss is basically ABC is the area which is dead weight loss. So it is basically dead weight loss amount, and Q2 is socially optimum sort of level of output that will get from the maximum level of consumption or positive consumption due to that particular externalities. So this is the two cases that we are trying to understand, like we are trying to explain that positive production externalities and positive consumption externalities. Even in this case market fails because we are deviating from point A and also from point B, and therefore the dead weight loss incurred. So I stop here, and then for this particular lecture I have used these two books. One is by Jonathan Gruber and the other one is from Joseph Stiglitz. So selected chapters that I have used, so you are recommended to study these two books, and then make a note of this very important points of the market failure that are coming out of externality. So thank you very much for your attentions, and I'll see you in my next lecture.